Adventure and Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
Wake up, America! It's time for the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY.com, West Palm Beach's #1 internet radio station. Here's your host, the Pipeman.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman W4CY Radio, and I'm here with our next guest who has some killer music and a killer band name that I was like, at first I'm like, oh, I'm really going to butcher this. So we'll see. So let's welcome to this show, Mitchell from Heinous Exsanguination. See, I did it. Exsanguination.
Perfect. Hey, how's it going, everybody? And thanks, Dean, for having me. I really appreciate it. Glad to be here.
My pleasure. Yeah, we were just talking about that before the interview. I was like, let me tell you how I think it is, and you tell me if I'm butchering it. And I did it perfect the first time. And that's the problem. Even when I do voiceovers, commercials, stuff like that, it's always the first take that if I get it right, I get it right and it's done. If I have to go to a second take, then sometimes it takes like 15 takes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yep. When you have to perform an action, like you did it right before perfectly. And I was like, yep, you got it. And then when you actually perform, then something in your mind gets tripped up and you're like, ugh, have a little brain fart.
And it reminds me, okay, so you'll be able to relate to this. I was just watching, I think it was yesterday or the day before, a video about Tom Araya from Slayer, and they're talking about Angel of Death and the scream that he does.
Oh,
and
right.
And basically, the first time he did it, when they weren't recording the song, they were just looking for a scream that would work, and the first scream was perfect. And he never was able to repeat it ever again.
Wow. Yeah. I know exactly. I love Slayer. I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's crazy because I've seen them live a few times. And I think the last time I saw them, I think he wasn't even doing anything at the time for that song, because they were this was probably 2015 or something. So they were starting to, get up there. But the few times I did see him before that, when he did do the scream, it did not sound like the record.
I know, right? And they did, luckily, the producer luckily recorded it when it was just like a practice scream, because that's the one they used.
Right.
And I went to, you're going to love this, I went to their first show ever.
Oh, wow. Where was that at?
I can't even remember. It was either the Woodstock or the Troubadour or one of those places.
Yeah.
It's like such, listen, if you remember the 80s, in the early 80s Sunset Strip, LA days, you weren't really there.
Yeah. Yep.
But he used to scream a lot in the beginning live, and that's what I noticed at the end is he wasn't screaming anymore. It was just the growl.
Yeah. And it was kind of, and even the other songs that they do, it's kind of, the energy wasn't quite as there as like, cause I've seen I've watched all those early Slayer live videos, and yeah, it's a lot of energy. And it's like, some of it's like kind of, similar to like modern screaming today, Right.
And me personally, he's my friend too, but Dave Lombardo, that to me, that defines Slayer.
100%. Yep. I agree. Yep. One of my best friends is a huge Slayer fan, and he's the same way. So that makes Dave made the like connected it all together.
Well, it was that double bass, okay? Because there was no double bass at the time.
Right.
And Dave brought the punk into it. So did Jeff. Like Dave and Jeff were punks, and Tom wasn't even really a metalhead before being in Slayer. And then Kerry was the true metalhead.
Right. Yep. That makes sense.
So yeah. So now what I want to say is about your band. Okay. How do you have, I'm always amazed by this, two people making such a full sound?
Man, it's really just the technology that we have today. And I talk about this all the time, like to people that ask me, or, you know, just different conversations with producers, musicians. Even like now in 2024, I started doing audio stuff in 2011, 12, somewhere around there. Even around then, and then even in like, you know, 2015 to 2018, the stuff you could do like 2-man projects like this, but it was a lot harder. Days there's just so many different tools that you can use to, like, you can make a full production off your laptop with a microphone, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And a lot of people, and it takes some skill though. Like, I mean, a lot of people are, you know, they're like, oh, it's so easy to do that. Like, it's, to actually do it right, it's you still got to know, you know, what you're doing.
I love that you just said that, because I want to expand on that, especially for all the gatekeepers out there that are like, well, if you're not actually playing the instrument, then you're not really a musician. And it does. Listen, I learned my lesson once when I went to a festival to cover it, and they had a DJ there. I'm like, I don't get why people, I was one of those gatekeepers. I don't get why people go to a live DJ show. Just go to the nightclub, okay? Like, that's not a concert. But then I got it when I was there, and I got the idea of it. And if you did try to do these things yourself, just like people with podcasting, like I run a whole network here, and I laugh at the DIY people that watch a video and think they know how to do it and think that's all there is to it. And that's the point I want you to expand on, is how you really do have to know what you're doing. Totally.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was thinking, so what we do, the live parts of the Heinous Exsanguination recordings is all the guitar. I record and write all of the guitar. And then the vocals are also obviously, you know, done in real time as well. The drums and the bass are all programmed though. But then my next point on that is, so the drums, I mean, you have to, I don't call myself a drummer, but I can play drums, you know. I call myself a guitarist and a producer. Drums is kind of like my secondary thing. But, you know, if I didn't know how to play drums, or just know like what that rhythm feels like, it's very easy to program drums to a song, and then it just sounds like a straight up computer. Because, you know, if you have a little bit of background in the actual thing, then you know how it's supposed to sound. You know, you can get it to where it's programmed, and you can make it do crazy double bass that is probably not possible in real life, but you can still make it like pretty, you know, to where it doesn't feel like a straight up drum machine. Right. And same too, like when you program the bass, you know, I have a little bit of background in like music theory and stuff. So, I mean, you have to know like what notes to punch in on the program, the different velocities, the length of each note. Like, you know, you don't just go in and, you know, type stuff in and, oh, there it is. That's like the longest part to me of making these songs too, is programming the bass and drums. That's like the part that takes the most time, for sure. Because I can sit there and record slam riffs for forever, you know. But yeah, programming the stuff is the hardest part, I would say. Yeah, and you definitely have to know the music itself. You also have to know how to program. You also have to know the sound engineering part of it, because, you know, if you make it even as simple as the wrong volume, it's not going to sound right. And you struck a point with that I relate to when you're talking about sounding like a computer with AI going on right now. Okay, and it's pretty heavy in my industry too. And I've checked out certain AI like solutions for doing voiceovers for a commercial. Right. And I don't like any of them because they don't sound like a human being. However, that's just the stock stuff for
average person that goes and picks that. But for a professional like me, I am able to take that AI and manipulate it and customize it to where it does sound human and not a computer. And I think that's the big difference between a pro and an amateur. An amateur experiments with it and kind of relies on the technology, where the pro uses the technology but relies on their abilities to make the technology better.
100%. Yeah. And like, as you're saying that, you know, I've recorded live drums a handful of times in the past. And I mean, if we really wanted to, we could do everything live. It would just be a much bigger venture, and it would cost a lot more money and require a few more people. But yeah, that's why I think it's so cool that, these days you can just have like me and JP, just two people making music like this. And it's very common in this, in the slamming brutal death metal world, to have like a 1-man or 2-man project like that.
You know, I love every time you say slam. Okay, I go back to old school before there was a word called moshing, and we called it slam dancing.
Right.
And slam, and now it's got its own genre.
Yep. Yeah, and I really just so I grew up on like classic rock and stuff, and then I got into like, you know, metalcore and early deathcore stuff. I really have only been into this slam genre since about 2020 or so. So only about 3-4 years. So I'm newer. I'm a metalhead, but I'm newer to the slam side of things.
So maybe tell the audience, because they might not know, because it's not a term used a lot nowadays. So what differentiates slam from other types of death metal?
So slam, I would say, is basically, it's slowed down in like its truest sense. Like, I believe a lot of people say Suffocation invented slam. A lot of people say Internal Bleeding invented slam. But either way, early 90s death metal stuff, it was the parts where in the death metal songs, because it would be fast blast beats and stuff, and then they would break it down to like not a breakdown, but kind of like a groovy, and most of the riffs, they have like this kind of flow that goes like dun 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 dun. So that's what defines slam for me, is like that pattern, and also like the use of the vocals. A lot of the time it's not like a metalcore or deathcore type of vocal. It's more of a sounds sometimes like a frog or a cricket. That's and that's another part of slam too, is I view the vocal as just another instrument, you know.
Yeah.
So it all kind of combines together, instead of where most music, like we were just talking about Slayer, like that scream, you know, like, yeah, you have music going on behind it, but that scream is like the main point right there. And in most music, you know, like most popular music, the vocal is the lead thing. But for my thinking with slam, it's like I said, it's just that one pattern, obviously with a bunch of different variations and stuff, but centered around that, and just kind of everything works together to make like a very heavy, kind of nasty, raw, aggressive music.
And you know, when you were describing it, I was having a flashback visual in my head of being in a pit, and you know, and then the whole thing is when the music did slow down, like you're still in the pit slamming, but kind of in slow motion,
right?
Catching your breath.
Yep, definitely.
For the next brutal part.
Definitely. Yeah, I was gonna say a bunch of like you're talking about the metal gatekeepers and stuff. a lot of people will be like, oh, it's not slam unless it's like all slow like that. But there's so many different variations of this type of music these days. I feel like that, you can, most bands are kind of most slam and bands in the slam genre are a mixture of like classic death metal with, classic slam. So it's not all just slow breakdowny parts. A lot of fast, like blast beats and, more classic death metal parts or even thrash stuff.
Well, and it's wild because in the beginning, like death and thrash, cross paths. I mean, I used to go see Possessed all the time with Dark
Right.
Angel, and with Slayer and with Metallica and bands like that. So it was like death was almost like part of thrash, but a different part. And it just evolved to where it is today.
Yep. I totally agree.
So I love, and we have it behind me too, but I love your artwork. Even on the singles, the artwork is so intricate and so cool. And I'm very much into that, like the whole idea of music is not just the music, but it's the whole sensory experience. And you guys, man, you're like right behind me, the new album coming out. I mean, that artwork's insane. I would just sit there and listen to a whole album and find every little detail in that artwork. That's the old school me.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. And that's another part of like death metal and or metal in general, I think, is the album covers, especially with the slam stuff. It's usually some pretty dark subject matter, and it's always like really well done artwork. There's a bunch of really great artists out there who do make these death metal and slam album covers, and I would say that's a huge part of it.
And so tell us about the new album, and why people should definitely listen to it. I know why, because I heard it, but
definitely. So the album is called The Stench of Decaying Flesh. It's going to be coming out on Gorehouse Productions. And I started writing these songs, I guess it was back in 2022 or something like that. We wrote one song, the first single called Bodies Open Easier Than You Think.
I love that.
Like in early 2023, I think. And then somehow JP got us hooked up with the Gorehouse people, and they wanted us to do the album. So I ended up over the course of a few months just writing, I think it was 6 or 7 more songs. And I wrote, like I said, I wrote those about 2 years ago. So I haven't touched those songs in a while. So it's going to be cool to see them come out and actually like revisit them and listen to them all again, because right now the 3 singles are out, but all the rest of them are just, files on my computer. So it'll be cool to actually see the names of them and, look at it on your phone on Spotify and, listen to the whole thing while you said, like you said, looking at the artwork and all that.
And so for you, okay, like you, I started with classic rock, before it was called classic rock.
Right.
Because there was nothing else at the time. And, it was funny because I was just interviewing John Lodge from the Moody Blues. And I said to him, I'm like, yeah, I knew about your band because I had a brother that was 11 years older than me, and I used to rifle through his albums, and yours was one of them. And he was like, yeah, seems like all of our fans had older brothers. And it's kind of how it starts. You start there because that's where it is, and then evolve to just like the genres itself. So for you, what was that one point in time where you were like, yeah, this is who I am and what I want to do?
Man, there's a few of them actually. So the earliest one I remember being I don't know how old I was. I was probably 4 or 5, and I remember seeing Gene Simmons on TV, And I would remember being like scared as hell, but I thought it was super fucking cool at the same time.
Nice.
And then, so that kind of got my interest, you know, in rock music, guitars, you know, concerts in general right there. But then when I was in about middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, somewhere around there, this was the early 2000s. And like I said, all that metalcore stuff was coming out. And I was starting to hear like breakdowns and the screaming and everything. So I got into that stuff before like thrash and, you know, Slayer and all the stuff we were talking about in the beginning. So I went from like classic rock to the 2000s metalcore stuff, and then revisited all the older thrash and early death metal stuff.
That's wild.
It sparked my interest when I saw Gene Simmons on TV, put something in my head as a child. And then, yeah, when I started hearing all those breakdowns and screaming and stuff, I was like, I had already started playing guitar at the time, and that's just all I've ever wanted to do pretty much. And my main gig, I do all this producing stuff on the side. I'm a touring front of house engineer. So I just always knew that I had to work. Like I have to work with music somehow to be satisfied, at least, you know.
I know, right? And
Yep.
you know, you can tell the whole world from your own experience. I tell people all the time, like I go do radio coverage at festivals all the time. I'm leaving in a couple days for Rocklahoma. And, you know, all my friends are like, hey, man, can you get me side stage? I'm like, you don't want to be side stage. You want to be front of the house. Side stage sucks.
Oh, yeah.
The sound sucks, you know?
Yeah, just drums. That's all you're going to hear.
Exactly. So, like, it's very interesting that I think most people that go to music festivals do not even realize that the absolute best sound you could have is front of house.
Oh, yeah, totally. Especially at a festival, because doing festivals is the, like, as a front of house engineer, that's like it's intimidating at first because it's the big stage and big speakers and stuff, but it's so much easier to get a clear festival compared to, you know, a small little rock club or something where everything's concrete or brick or wood or something, and, you know, all the sounds just bouncing around everywhere and it's just loud. And, you know, so festivals are definitely festival front of house. Yes, that's a great listening position.
There you go. And, you know, you said Gene Simmons. I think Gene Simmons is a common denominator of many people because so I was born in New York, grew up in Jersey. The first album I ever owned that was my album myself, I think I was in like first grade, and I went to Seaside Heights to Boardwalk and won this Carney game, and they had these albums there you could win. And there were this one album, it had these 4 cool dudes on a black album, and I was like, that's the one I want. It was the original Kiss album when it first came out.
That's very cool. Yeah, I love that album cover. That's
right?
So cool. And it's like it's very dark too, you know. It's got a dark vibe to it. And
clean at the same time.
Right.
You know? And then I was 1 year for Halloween Gene Simmons as a kid.
I think I actually was as well. I can't remember if it was Gene Simmons or Paul Stanley, but it was one of them. Me and a friend, when we were probably right around that time I was talking about, we did the same thing.
Well, it's so funny because I was a drummer then, so I really loved Peter Criss and I loved Ace Frehley. Like they were my 2 favorites, but for a Halloween costume, you just had to be Gene.
Oh, totally.
You know, so tell everybody how they can connect to you guys, get the new album when it drops, check out all your singles now, and your merch and whatever else.
Of course, yeah. So we're mainly active on Instagram. That's how I've found that this little slam online death metal community is most active is on Instagram, and that's just the name of the band, Heinous Exsanguination. We have 3 singles out on should be on all the streaming services. And I believe the album comes out on September 6th through Gorehouse Productions. And that's also where you can buy like tapes, CDs, shirts is on, I believe it's just gorehouseproductions.com.
Nice. Is there
Yes.
anything else you want to let the listeners know that we haven't covered already that they need to know or look out for?
Man, I think that's about it. I think we kind of went through it all, and yeah, just, check it out if you like this kind of crazy new modern metal, then this is definitely for you.
When I was listening myself, I kind of got a vibe of if Hellhammer and Possessed had a baby, it would be that song that I was listening to.
Totally. Do you remember which song it was?
Yeah, it was Vile Rotting Mass.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. I haven't thought about it like that, but yeah, that's what's cool about, having these conversations, is because I probably would have never thought about it like that. But now that you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's,
See that? And,
Yep.
and it's funny the way you describe slam. I'm sitting there and thinking to myself, well, maybe Hellhammer was the original slam, because they weren't Celtic Frost yet, it was like that slow, grindy, but that same beat that you're talking about. So wild.
Yeah, it all comes from all has to start somewhere, I guess.
That's it. Well, you guys kill it, and I hope we see a lot more of you, because that song was badass, and I did listen to your other songs, and they're just all badass. So if you're a metalhead, I don't care what kind of metalhead, they need to listen to your music.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been really cool making this music, and it's literally my favorite thing to do in the world is sit in front of my computer and make music. So,
well, there you go. That's the only reason to do music nowadays, or any time, in my opinion, is if you love it, and it's obvious you have the passion for it. So thanks for making us great music, and thanks for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Of course, man. All right. Well, you enjoy Rocklahoma, and I appreciate it. Enjoyed our conversation, and looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing you maybe at a festival.
Yeah, maybe so. Just come to front of house, and if you see me, say what's up.
There you go. Have a good one, brother.
All right, man. Thank you. We'll see you later.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.